A rich man lost in memories of his deceased daughter. Suddenly, a faint, familiar laughter drifting from a dark alley made his heart beat. What he finds will shake him to his core. What is the secret behind his terrifying face? Subscribe to the channel and follow the story below to join this haunting journey where past and present collide in unimaginable ways. The dense fog wrapped itself around Boston that night, cloaking the city in an eerie stillness. Gerald Griffin, a man nearing 70 with a head of silver hair and eyes shadowed by years of grief, walked slowly along the vacant streets. His expression was etched with sorrow. The wrinkles on his face told a story of pain, marking the years he'd spent grieving for his daughter, Anna, who had perished in a fire almost 10 years ago. The sadness clung to him like a heavy weight, a hurt that never dulled, no matter how much time passed. Every night, he took these solitary walks, as if the cool night air might somehow lessen his heartache. But tonight, something felt different. As he turned a familiar corner, he caught a sound, a gentle laugh floating through the fog. It was light, joyful, and cut through his heart, transporting him back to the days when Anna was young, laughing and dancing around him, free from worry. His heart began to race. That laugh couldn't be real. But there it was again, coming from an alley just a few steps away. Before he knew it, his feet were moving, carrying him toward the sound as his mind whirled in disbelief. In the dim alleyway, he peered through the fog and saw her. A small figure huddled in a doorway, shivering beneath the faint glow of a flickering streetlight. She looked to be around 8, with curly blonde hair spilling over her shoulders. She hugged her arms close, trembling. As Gerald drew nearer, the girl looked up, and his heart nearly stopped. Her face was uncannily familiar. Her wide eyes and delicate features were a reflection of Anna's. It was as though he were seeing his daughter once again. He staggered, clutching his chest as his mind spun. Was he dreaming, or had his grief finally unraveled him? But then the girl spoke. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, yet it hit him like a bolt of lightning. Gerald felt the ground shift beneath him, his chest tight as he struggled to comprehend, suspended between reality and an impossible dream. "Anna," he choked out, his hand shaking as he reached toward her. The little girl's eyes slowly drifted shut, her small frame folding to the ground, lifeless and still. "Hang on, sweetie," he whispered, kneeling beside her and gently lifting her into his arms. Her skin felt like ice, and her clothes were soaked with the evening's dampness. He slipped off his coat, wrapping it tightly around her, clutching her close, as though he feared she'd vanish if he loosened his grip. The air was thick and stifling, pressing down on him as he rushed back to his house, holding her like she was his last hope. Once inside, Gerald carefully laid her on the couch, studying her face, so eerily familiar. Her golden curls, soft as sunshine, framed her features just like Anna's. On her wrist was a simple old-fashioned bracelet that made his blood freeze. He knew that bracelet well. He'd given it to Anna on her 7th birthday. This couldn't be, but there it was. The small silver bracelet gleaming faintly under his living room's dim light, as real as the beat of his heart. The girl stirred, her tiny hand reaching to grab his. "Daddy," she breathed, her voice as faint as a whisper. Gerald leaned closer, his heart storming with emotions, grief, hope, fear, all mixing in a dizzying swirl. "You're safe now," he murmured, not fully sure of his own words. "I'm here." As the night stretched on, Gerald sat beside her, watching her sleep, his mind racing with questions. Who was she? How could this girl have Anna's face, Anna's voice, even Anna's bracelet? His heart ached, torn between joy and dread, each beat laden with the weight of years, filled with lost hope and unresolved questions. He watched her breathe, each gentle rise and fall of her chest like a fragile promise. But as the hours slipped away, an unsettling feeling crept in. There was something unearthly about her presence, something he couldn't quite explain. Shadows seemed to dance in the corners of the room, and a chill seeped through the house, burrowing deep into his bones. Then, just before dawn, her eyes slowly opened. She looked up at him, her gaze sending shivers down his spine. "Do you remember the fire, Daddy?" she asked softly, her voice laced with an innocence that made her words all the more haunting. Gerald felt a tightness in his throat, memories crashing over him in relentless, painful waves. Slowly, he nodded, trying to contain the surge of grief welling up inside. "Yes," he whispered, his voice quivering. A bittersweet smile crossed her face as she looked past him, as if she were seeing something far beyond the walls of the room, something only she could glimpse. "I tried to find you," she murmured softly, "but you didn't come." The words sliced through him like a knife. He felt himself drowning in guilt as memories of that tragic night resurfaced with merciless clarity. The guilt from that night had followed him every single day since he had lost her once, to flames and smoke. Yet, here she was. Or was she? A girl with Anna's face, Anna's voice, and secrets that seemed to reach beyond this world. Choked with emotion, Gerald murmured, "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I couldn't save you then. I couldn't." His voice cracked, and tears began streaming down his face as he clutched her small hand like a lifeline. The girl's eyes softened with an odd, wise sadness, as if she carried an understanding beyond her years, as if she could sense the weight he bore. "It wasn't your fault, Daddy," she said, her voice so gentle he had to lean in to hear. Just as quickly, her eyelids fluttered shut, and she drifted back into a quiet, deep sleep. Gerald sat in silence, his mind racing, exhaustion pressing down on him. Eventually, he slipped into a restless sleep in the armchair beside her. His dreams tangled with memories of Anna, moments of laughter and joy now shadowed by the ache of loss. But among the memories, he saw something unsettling, a dark figure lingering at the edges, a mysterious presence watching from afar. He woke with a start, the first light of dawn casting shadows across the room. There she was, lying on the couch, her tiny chest rising and falling with each fragile breath. For a moment, a wave of relief washed over him. She was real. She was here. But as he looked closer, his heart stopped. Beside her on the floor lay a small, crumpled piece of paper, as if it had slipped from her hand in the night. He reached down, his hands trembling, and unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant and familiar, the script of his late wife. The words on the paper sent a chill through his bones. Gerald's hands trembled as he gripped the note, feeling an icy shiver ripple through him. "Keep her safe. She's all we have left." The words echoed in his mind, filling him with a confusion that bordered on terror. Who was this girl, and why did it feel like a voice from his lost family was calling out to him from the shadows of the past? As dawn shifted to a cold, foggy morning, Gerald studied the sleeping girl. She lay curled up beneath his coat, her small form huddled on the couch, as early morning light painted long shadows across the room. The familiar handwriting on the note, his late wife's, stirred memories and an ache deep within. Keep her safe. She's all we have left. The words haunted him. Who was this girl before him? A stranger with a face that reminded him of his daughter, clutching onto a sliver of his past. Gerald knew he needed answers, the weight of mystery pressing on him with each minute. He reached out to the few remaining family members he could, hoping one might provide a clue, though he doubted it. By mid-afternoon, he made the first call. His brother Vincent picked up on the second ring, his voice brisk and matter-of-fact as always. "Vincent," Gerald said, struggling to keep his tone steady, "I need to talk to you. It's important. Can you come over? Something's happened, and I can't make sense of it." A long pause followed before Vincent spoke. "Gerald, is this about Anna again?" The impatience in his voice cut deep, but Gerald pressed on. "Please, just come. I'll explain when you get here." Vincent finally agreed, promising he'd arrive within the hour. Gerald hung up, glancing over at the girl. He had begun calling her Julia, a name that somehow felt right, though strange on his lips. She was still asleep, her breathing soft, a bracelet clutched tightly to her chest. An hour later, Vincent walked in, his face a mixture of wariness and irritation. His gaze drifted to Julia, confusion flickering in his eyes before his expression grew cold, his gaze settling back on Gerald with a guarded intensity. "Is this why you brought me here?" Vincent asked, pointing toward the child fast asleep on the couch. "Gerald, this girl, she looks like—" He hesitated, disbelief clear in his eyes. "Yes," Gerald replied softly, the reality of his own words feeling strange. "She looks exactly like Anna." Vincent shook his head, frustration twisting his face. "Gerald, you need to let this go. Anna is gone. She's been gone for years, and clinging to these illusions, it's not doing you any good. You're seeing things that aren't real." Gerald's shoulders sagged, his brother's words hitting him hard. "She knew things, Vincent," he whispered, voice rough with desperation. "Things only Anna would know. She even called me Daddy." "Gerald," Vincent interrupted, his voice sharp, almost cutting. "You've always let grief swallow you up. This might just be your mind playing tricks. Can't you see that?" The room fell silent, and a cold, heavy sadness settled in Gerald's chest. He glanced from his brother to the girl lying peacefully on the couch, her face soft and innocent in her sleep. Vincent didn't understand. No one could. How could they? None of them had lost a child. They hadn't lived with the unending guilt of wondering if they could have done something, anything, to prevent it. With one last look of disapproval, Vincent muttered, "I think you need real help, Gerald." And with that, he left, the door closing with a quiet but final click. As the sound faded, Gerald felt more isolated than ever. He looked around the room, its walls seemingly pressing in on him, and realized how distant and cold his world had become. They didn't understand. None of them did. They hadn't felt the raw, relentless ache of losing a child, or the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, something miraculous could restore a piece of what he'd lost. Later that night, he reached out to Austin, his oldest friend, hoping he'd understand, or at least listen. When Austin arrived, he greeted Gerald with a worried look, his eyes kind as they took in Gerald's worn expression. Gerald poured out the whole story, everything about the girl's uncanny resemblance to Anna, the bracelet, the note, her knowing gaze, and the secrets she seemed to carry. Austin listened quietly, his sympathetic silence providing a comfort Gerald hadn't realized he needed so deeply. As the story progressed, Gerald's gaze grew distant, his forehead creasing with worry. "Gerald," Austin began gently, placing a firm hand on his friend's shoulder. "I know how much Anna meant to you. Losing her shattered you. Sometimes the heart holds tight to what it can't bear to release. Are you certain this isn't just your mind's way of, well, holding on to her?" Gerald's response was barely audible. "I held her, Austin. I held her in my arms, and she called me Daddy. How can that just be in my head?" Austin exhaled deeply, casting a glance toward Julia, who was stirring awake. Her eyes blinked open, disoriented at first, before her gaze settled on Gerald, with a mix of innocence and longing. "Daddy," she whispered again, reaching out, her small hand slipping trustingly into his, a touch so pure it nearly broke him. Austin's face clouded with something unreadable as he shook his head. "Gerald, you need to be careful. If you keep this girl here, if you let yourself believe, you're only setting yourself up for more pain. You're grieving, my friend, and grief can mess with you. Step back for a moment. Maybe it's just a coincidence, a child who resembles Anna. Maybe you're seeing what you want to see." Gerald's shoulders dove, feeling the weight of Austin's disbelief. No one believed him. The sense of isolation wrapped around him like a cage, trapping him in his sorrow, unable to make anyone understand. After Austin left, Gerald sat in the silence, his mind swirling with doubt, fear, and sorrow. He glanced at Julia, now fully awake, her wide, trusting eyes looking up at him. "Daddy," she murmured softly, "why does everyone leave you?" Her words cut deep, unfiltered and raw. Gerald swallowed, his voice cracking as he answered, "I don't know, sweetheart. I just don't know." As the night wore on, Julia clung to him, her tiny fingers wrapped around his hand like he was her lifeline in an immense, empty world. Even as he held her close, Gerald felt his hope slipping away, torn between the desire to believe and the painful reality pressing down on him. Suddenly, Julia's face contorted in pain, her small body beginning to tremble. "Daddy, I feel so cold," she murmured, her voice thin and fragile, sending a jolt of fear through Gerald. Gerald quickly draped his coat around her, his heart pounding, with an instinctive need to protect her. As he reached for the blanket on the couch, something unusual caught his eye. A shadow hovered at the room's edge, dark and menacing, before disappearing in an instant. A chill washed over him, as if some unseen presence had just slipped away, leaving a bone-chilling cold behind. He stared at the empty space, heart pounding, as Julia whimpered softly by his side. In the days that followed, Gerald was lost in a cloud of confusion, feeling as if he were trapped in a waking nightmare filled with questions no one could answer. Boston's dense fog seemed to seep into his bones as he wandered through his quiet home, each room echoing with memories. Only Julia's presence gave him a sense of purpose, but even that felt precarious. Like it could break at any moment, Julia had grown distant, often sitting by the window, her gaze fixed far beyond, lost in her thoughts. She was so young, so fragile. Gerald's heart ached for her, feeling both protective and haunted, as if he were grieving and guarding her at the same time. He couldn't shake the small voice within him, whispering that she might be his Anna, something of her, somehow. It terrified him, yet he clung to the hope it sparked. One chilly morning, Gerald found a note slipped under his door. It was from Dr. Mason, his long-time family doctor from his early years in Boston, a man he had once trusted deeply. The note was brief, suggesting Dr. Mason might have some insights into what Gerald was experiencing. The doctor invited him for a private meeting in the afternoon. Gerald, though hesitant, longed for some clarity, a glimmer of understanding, anything to unravel the mysteries surrounding Julia. That afternoon he arrived at the clinic. Gerald was torn between anxiety and relief as he entered the office. The quiet space had walls painted in soft, calming shades of blue and white. Dr. Mason welcomed him with a warm smile, yet there was an unease in the doctor's gaze that Gerald couldn't quite pinpoint. They shared a few pleasantries before Gerald began speaking about Julia, his words pouring out as if he were trying to catch up with a reality that kept slipping away. Dr. Mason listened intently, his expression calm and unreadable, as Gerald recounted the unsettling events, the uncanny likeness, the bracelet, details only Anna would recognize. And then he mentioned the note written in his late wife's handwriting, a message that filled him with both solace and fear. Keep her safe. She's all we have left. Dr. Mason stayed silent, leaning forward, his hands folded, contemplating Gerald's words. After a pause, he spoke gently. Gerald, his voice low and steady. I have no doubt that what you've gone through feels incredibly real. But grief has a way of influencing our minds in ways we don't entirely understand. Sometimes, memories reshape themselves during times of loss. Gerald's heart felt heavy. He wanted to argue, to insist that this wasn't just about grief or memories, but Dr. Mason's steady, unwavering gaze unsettled him, dimming his hope. Almost as if sensing Gerald's hesitation, Dr. Mason's expression softened. There's something else, Gerald. Something I didn't plan on sharing, unless I thought it necessary. Dr. Mason opened a drawer and took out a worn, faded notebook. This belonged to your late wife. Gerald's heart raced as he accepted the notebook, his hands trembling. He hadn't known this existed or that she had kept anything so private. Opening it, he scanned the first few pages, recognizing his wife's familiar looping handwriting. She had written about her memories, her reflections, her anxieties, but as he continued reading, his eyes widened. She had written about a child, a little girl she had seen in her dreams long before Anna was born. A child who bore a striking resemblance to Anna. His wife had been haunted by visions of this girl. Before Gerald ever met her, there were signs, a hint of destiny, a foreboding that this child might one day arrive in their lives during a dark time. Gerald looked up at Dr. Mason, his hands slackening as the notebook slipped away. His thoughts swirled, trying to process the reality that his wife had somehow foreseen something, someone, long before they ever had Anna. Was it even possible? Could Julia be tied to this secret vision his wife had written about? As Gerald tried to make sense of it, he noticed a shift in Dr. Mason's expression. Dr. Mason laid a firm hand on Gerald's shoulder, his voice adopting a calm, almost soothing tone. Gerald, he began, I want to help. And I think the best way to do that is by setting up care for Julia. She needs real support. I believe that if you let me bring in specialists, both you and Julia could get the help you need. A wave of nausea crept over Gerald. What? You're talking about taking her away? The very idea was unbearable. His only purpose now was to protect Julia, even if he didn't fully understand the mystery surrounding her. Dr. Mason's face stayed neutral, perhaps too neutral, as he nodded slightly. Gerald, think about what's best for both of you. We can give her a safe place, where she'll have the care she needs from people who are trained for this, he continued. Gerald's anger rose, raw and powerful. His chest tightened as he stood, his voice trembling with resolve. No, he said, shaking his head. No one's taking her from me. I won't let you, Mason. I thought you understood. Dr. Mason's expression turned hard, his tone colder. Gerald, if you keep resisting, I may have to involve the authorities. I'm worried for you. I truly am. But if you refuse help, you could lose her anyway. Gerald left the clinic, a storm of confusion and betrayal brewing in his heart. How could he protect Julia if even those he trusted wanted to take her away? He couldn't bear the idea of her being in the hands of strangers beyond his reach. He drove home in silence, each mile weighed down with betrayal and heartache. When he arrived, Julia was by the window, looking out into the darkening evening. She turned as he walked in, her gaze soft yet knowing, as though she sensed the pain weighing down on him. They don't believe me, he murmured, sinking onto the couch beside her, his face heavy with disbelief. They think I'm losing it. Julia reached over, her small hand gently brushing his cheek. Daddy, I believe you, she said softly, her voice unwavering and filled with an odd wisdom beyond her years. I remember you from before the fire." Gerald's breath hitched, his heart racing. "What do you mean, sweetheart? How could you remember?" But before she could answer, her face grew pale, her eyes wide with fear as she gripped his hand tightly. "Daddy, there's something in the room," she whispered, her voice trembling. Her gaze darted around, lingering in the dim corners, and Gerald felt a chill crawl over his skin. It was as if an unseen presence had seeped into the room. He pulled her close, trying to comfort her, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something was indeed there, watching. The room felt colder, shadows seemed to thicken, and a strange tension filled the air, like a storm waiting to break. He held her tightly, whispering calming words, even as his own fear bubbled under the surface. Then, without warning, Julia whimpered softly, clutching her chest. "It hurts, Daddy," she gasped, her face twisting in pain. Alarmed, Gerald wrapped his arms around her, rocking her, desperate to ease her distress. "I'm here, sweetheart, I'm right here," he murmured, his voice thick with worry. Yet as he tried to comfort her, his heart stopped when he saw the bracelet on her wrist start to glow. A faint, eerie light surrounded it, pulsing as if alive. His mind spun. It was the bracelet he'd given to Anna so long ago, the one she wore until her last days. Now it flickered with an otherworldly light, throbbing as though it carried life, secrets, and memories he couldn't fathom. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the light faded, leaving only the cold metal against her delicate wrist. Julia's breathing eased, her face softening into a calm, peaceful expression. Gerald held her close, his thoughts racing and questions and fears piling up. The mysterious, glowing bracelet, the eerie presence in the room, Julia's unsettling memories. Each circled his mind, tightening into a knot of dread and awe. As he sat in the quiet darkness, a horrifying realization settled in. Whatever was happening to Julia, whatever link she held to Anna, wasn't over, not by a long shot. And he sensed that he'd have to confront whatever darkness lingered in the shadows to keep her safe. Outside, the wind wailed, and he felt the weight of his daughter's memories, the ghosts of the past, pressing down on him. Gerald couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, as if something relentless and unavoidable lurked in the shadows, waiting for them. Days dragged by in an endless haze, thick with mist, amplifying his sense of loneliness. Only Julia was there, her delicate presence like a thread, tethering him to the world. Every night, odd things occurred. Shadows flickered in corners without explanation, and whispers floated through the air, seemingly from nowhere. His sleep was filled with disturbing images of Anna, visions of the fire, and a crushing, consuming feeling of loss. Yet each dawn, he awoke to find Julia nearby, clutching her bracelet as if it were a lifeline. But even Julia was changing. Her once bright eyes had grown dark, and each day she seemed to become more frail. Her face was pale, her body appearing thinner and weaker. Often, she would wake in the night, gripping her chest, struggling to breathe, as if some unseen force was weighing her down. Each time, Gerald held her close, comforting her however he could, though a growing sense of helplessness gnawed at him. One chilly evening, unable to watch her suffer any longer, he decided to take action. In an effort to find some clue among the memories left behind, he decided to visit the family home where he and his wife had raised Anna out of desperation. The house had been abandoned since Anna's passing, standing as a painful monument to loss and sorrow that he hadn't faced in years. As he and Julia neared the house, an ominous feeling swept over him. The windows were black, the paint worn and peeling, with vines clawing up the walls like ghostly hands. He could almost hear echoes of the past, the laughter that once filled the rooms, the warmth of family dinners, bedtime stories, and those quiet, cherished moments with Anna and his wife. Now the house was silent, a hollow reminder of what once was. With a shaky hand, Gerald unlocked the door and pushed it open. Dust particles floated in the dim light, and the air was thick with the smell of decay and time. Julia held tightly to his side, her wide eyes scanning the empty rooms, as if sensing something unseen. Together, they slowly made their way through the house. Gerald's heart grew heavier with every room they walked past. The once bright living room, now cloaked in shadows and covered in old sheets. The kitchen, where he and Anna had baked cookies together, her laughter echoing in the air. And finally, they reached Anna's old bedroom. It was a small room painted a soft pink, still decorated with her childhood drawings. Gerald felt his breath hitch as he stepped inside. Everything remained exactly as they'd left it. Her books were still neatly arranged on the shelf, her favorite stuffed animal perched on the bed. It was as if time had paused, preserving her memory in a way that felt both comforting and profoundly heartbreaking. As he took in the room, Julia went over to a small desk by the window, her eyes landing on a framed photograph. She picked it up carefully, her gaze fixed on it. It was a picture of Anna on her 7th birthday. In the photo, Anna was beaming, wearing the very bracelet now on Julia's wrist. But what shook Gerald was the faint image in the background, a shadowy figure, a small girl, her face barely visible, but with eyes that seemed to look straight at the camera. Gerald's heart pounded as he recognized those eyes. They were Julia's. "How?" he murmured, his voice cracking. His mind reeled with the impossibility of it. This photo had been taken years before Julia ever came into his life. Yet there she was, a ghostly figure standing by Anna's side. Julia looked up at him, her expression blank. "I was always there, Daddy," she said softly, a strange sorrow lacing her voice. "I watched you from afar, waiting for you to find me." Gerald's heart raced, his feelings a mix of fear and anguish. "Julia, what are you saying?" he asked, his voice trembling. She shook her head slowly, as if the answer was too painful to put into words. "I don't remember everything," she whispered, barely audible. "But I remember feeling lost, like I didn't belong anywhere. Then I found you." Gerald knelt beside her, clasping her small hands in his. "Julia, no matter what, you're safe with me," he said firmly, his voice unsteady. "We'll face this together." But as he spoke, something shifted in the corner of his eye. A shadow, just outside the window, dark and elusive. Gerald turned quickly, his heart pounding. But it was gone. Only his and Julia's faint reflections remained in the glass. Still, the chilling feeling lingered, as if something unseen was watching, waiting. Suddenly, Julia's small hand tightened around his. "Daddy, I'm cold again," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. Her face had turned a ghostly white, her lips shaded pale blue, and her body quaked uncontrollably. His heart raced as he held her close, trying to warm her up, leading her through the stillness of the house. But with every step, it felt as though the walls were pressing in, memories and shadows encircling them. The house, which had previously served as their safe haven, now felt oppressive and haunted by echoes that wouldn't go away. By the time they reached the door, Julia was shivering violently, her breaths shallow and labored. She curled up against him, fragile and small, and he hurried her to the car. His heart pounded as he drove, every mile feeling stretched and endless, as he glanced at her weakened state, fragile and vulnerable beside him. When they finally got back, he carried her into the house, gently placing her on the couch. She looked up at him, eyes filled with a deep sadness, wise beyond her years. "Daddy, I don't know how much longer I can stay," she murmured, her voice a soft whisper. "It feels like something's pulling me away." Gerald felt his heart crack open. "No, honey," he said, his voice quivering. "I won't let anything take you from me. I'll keep you safe. I promise." She gave a faint smile, reaching out to touch his face. "It's not your fault, Daddy. Some things are just beyond us." Her words were gentle, almost as if she were comforting him, even as she seemed to drift further from his reach. Overcome, Gerald held her close, his hands shaking as he rocked her gently. He felt as if he were losing her all over again, just like he had lost Anna. Years of hidden grief flooded over him, each tear carrying the weight of those losses. As he clung to her, he noticed something, a faint, nearly invisible warmth coming from the bracelet on her wrist. He pulled back, his gaze fixed on it, his heart pounding as he watched the silver glint softly in the dim room. The bracelet seemed almost alive, radiating a soft glow that reacted to his touch, as if it knew him. Gerald traced his finger over it, feeling a comforting warmth seep into his skin, calming his fears, even if just for a moment. Julia's eyes fluttered open, her face softening with a strange calm. "Daddy, can you hear it?" she whispered, her eyes drifting toward the corner of the room. Gerald strained his ears, but only silence filled the air. "Hear what, sweetheart?" "A voice," she murmured, her expression lightening with a gentle, peaceful smile. "It feels familiar." The hair on the back of Gerald's neck prickled. He almost told her it was just her imagination. But the look on her face kept him silent. She was so serene, so content, as if hearing a lullaby only she remembered. For a fleeting moment, he felt a strange peace himself. Then suddenly, Julia's body tensed, her face twisting in pain as her hand shot to her chest. She gasped, her breaths coming in shallow bursts, and fear clutched Gerald's heart. "Julia!" he cried, grabbing her hand, his voice breaking. "Stay with me, sweetheart. Please," he begged, looking into her eyes, which held a sorrowful understanding. "I'm trying," she whispered, her voice as delicate as a thread. And then, as if something had taken over, her head fell back, her small frame going still. Panic surged as he held her, searching for any sign of life. Her chest was still beneath his trembling hands. He shook her gently, his voice cracking. "Julia, please don't leave me. I need you." Just when he felt himself drowning in despair, a faint breath passed her lips, and her eyes slowly opened, distant and unfocused. She looked up at him with a soft, faraway gaze. "Daddy," she murmured, her voice almost a whisper. "Promise me, you'll find the truth." Gerald's throat tightened, his tears flowing as he whispered, "I promise, Julia. I'll find the truth, no matter what." She gave a slight nod, her eyes drifting closed again, as she slipped into a deep, troubled sleep. Gerald stayed by her side, his heart torn between relief and dread, knowing that whatever dark forces plagued her weren't finished. Shadows in the room deepened, stretching long and dark, as if reaching to reclaim her once more. As Gerald sat by her side, holding her hand, an unsettling feeling of dread crept over him, a fear that he was racing against an unseen shadow closing in. The next morning he woke up on the couch, groggy and drained, having spent the night beside Julia. She lay curled next to him, her breathing soft and shallow, her face so peaceful that it tugged at his heart, filling him with both sorrow and fear. It felt as though every day she was slipping away just a bit more, her small frame appearing more fragile and delicate with each passing moment. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her, not after everything they'd shared. But as he watched her sleep, the promise he'd made to her the previous night lingered heavily in his mind. "Promise me. You'll find the truth." It echoed within him, pushing him to uncover who she was, what had drawn her into his life, and how she was so inexplicably tied to Anna's memory. The mysteries surrounding her felt like shadows lengthening across his heart, filling him with questions he feared to confront. That morning, while Julia rested, Gerald reached out to an old acquaintance, Peter Lowell, a man known for his work in family history and genealogy. Peter was eccentric, yes, but he was also famous for his skill in unearthing family secrets, some hidden for generations. Gerald hoped Peter might uncover a link, any thread that could connect Julia to his family or to Anna's memory. Peter arrived that afternoon. A tall, lean man with a sharp and curious expression, Peter listened intently as Gerald described Julia, her uncanny resemblance to Anna, the bracelet, and even the strange photograph taken on Anna's birthday, with Julia's figure appearing mysteriously in the background. Peter's eyes gleamed with curiosity, though a glint of caution surfaced as well. "Gerald," he began in a quiet, serious voice, "this is unusual to say the least, but I've encountered families haunted by mysteries like this before. Sometimes the answers lie in places we'd never think to look. I'll do everything I can to help you uncover the truth." He then set out his papers, spreading charts and notebooks filled with notes on Gerald's family lineage. For hours, Peter pored over the records, marking each mention of Anna or a fragment of Gerald's family history, his face growing more intrigued and more troubled with every new discovery. As evening crept in, Peter leaned back, his brow deeply furrowed. "I discovered something odd," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "Years back, there was a girl in the family. Her name was Clara. People back then whispered that she was somehow tied to the supernatural, the very things that folks feared. There were those who thought she was a spirit returned, a child who somehow existed between two worlds." Gerald felt Peter's words seep into him, a chill settling deep inside. "Are you saying Julia is connected to this ancestor?" Gerald asked. Peter paused, choosing his words carefully. "What I'm saying is that sometimes mysteries don't fade away. They lie in wait, biding their time in the dark. I believe Julia's connection to your family runs deeper than you might think." Gerald's pulse quickened, caught between accepting and rejecting this revelation, the weight of it bearing down on him. Before he could speak, a soft voice from the corner startled him. He turned to see Julia standing there, her face pale, her eyes wide. "Daddy," she whispered. Her gaze moved between him and Peter, filled with both fear and something else he couldn't quite place. "Who is he?" Gerald walked to her, kneeling and gently taking her hands. "Sweetheart, this is Peter. He's here to help us find some answers, to understand where you came from, why you're here." Julia's expression darkened, her face growing distant. "You don't believe me," she said, pulling her hands back. "You think I'm just some mystery to figure out." Her words sliced through him. "No, Julia. I do believe you. I just want to help." But her face remained hard, her small form tense. "Maybe you don't really believe in me at all," she whispered, turning and retreating into the shadows. Gerald watched her leave, his heart heavy, a pang of guilt twisting inside him. All he'd wanted was to protect her, to find a way to save her. But now he realized he might have made her feel like a riddle to solve, instead of the daughter he had vowed to love. Peter cleared his throat, his expression serious. "Gerald," he said softly, "I think this goes beyond what's written on any document. I suggest speaking with someone who understands these things better. I know a woman, an old friend, who has experience with cases like this." Though the thought unsettled him, Gerald reluctantly agreed. He felt there was no other option. The idea of losing Julia to the mysterious shadows that seemed to hover around her was unbearable. The following day, Peter arranged a meeting for Gerald and Julia with a woman named Cheryl Carter, whose very presence was wrapped in mystery. Gerald had no idea what awaited him as he and Julia approached Cheryl's quaint, remote house, just beyond town. Towering, twisted trees loomed over the place, and a dense mist hugged the ground, making everything feel still and heavy. The house itself looked aged and worn, with ivy creeping up its walls and windows that seemed to watch them with a quiet, unsettling awareness. Cheryl appeared at the doorway, her long silver hair cascading down her back, and her gaze was sharp, almost piercing. Her eyes met Julia's with a look both curious and cautious, as though she could see through Julia's innocent appearance into something darker that lingered beneath. After a few formal greetings, Cheryl invited them in. She directed her focus on Julia, studying her in a way that left Gerald feeling uneasy. "So, you're the girl who shouldn't be here," Cheryl said, quietly, her voice soft, yet strangely unsettling. Julia looked up at her, a trace of fear flickering in her eyes. "I don't understand. Why shouldn't I be here?" Cheryl's expression softened slightly, her voice carrying a hint of sadness. "Sometimes, little one, spirits are called back before their time. They remain, lost, searching for something they couldn't take with them, or someone." Gerald felt his chest tighten as he took in her words, his mind racing. "Are you saying that Julia... she's here because of Anna?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Cheryl looked at him with deep understanding in her eyes. "I'm saying there's a bond here, one that exists beyond time and place. Sometimes love crosses over, connecting two souls in ways we may never fully comprehend." Gerald's heart pounded as he felt caught between awe and fear. He looked down at Julia, who was close to tears, her small hands beginning to tremble. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice shaking, "if I'm here because of Anna, does that mean I'm not real?" Gerald's heart broke at her words. "No, sweetheart, you're real. You're here with me. That's all that matters." Cheryl nodded slowly, her expression grave. "But you need to understand, Gerald, there are powers involved here that go beyond anything you can control. If Julia is here because of something unresolved, it could take her away from you. And there's only one way to keep her here." Gerald leaned in, his voice filled with desperation. "Tell me, I'll do anything," Gerald pleaded. Cheryl's expression turned somber. "You need to find peace with what happened, Gerald. It's time to let go of the guilt you've held on to for Anna's death. Unresolved pain can linger like a shadow, drawing spirits near. As long as you're trapped in this sorrow, Julia may never find freedom." A wave of helplessness hit Gerald. How could he even begin to release the guilt, the weight that had defined his life for so long? How could he let go of the sadness that seemed to cling to her too? Yet in that moment, he realized he had to try. Cheryl placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "If you truly want to save her, Gerald, you'll need to open yourself to real healing." That evening, Gerald and Julia returned home, their silence heavy with unspoken words. Gerald tried to speak to comfort her, but each word felt empty and hollow. Deep into the night, he awoke to find Julia missing from her bed. Panic rose in him as he frantically searched the house, calling her name, his voice trembling in the darkness. Finally, he found her in Anna's old room, standing by the window, bathed in the gentle glow of moonlight. "Julia," he whispered as he stepped closer. "What are you doing in here?" She turned slowly, her face pale, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "I think it's time for me to go, Daddy," she murmured, her voice a mere whisper. Gerald's heart shattered as he knelt beside her, clutching her small hands tightly. "No, Julia, don't say that. You're safe here. We'll find a way to keep you here." But she only shook her head, a sad smile touching her lips. "You're holding on too tight, Daddy. I can feel it. And it's hurting me." His world seemed to crumble, his very soul tearing apart. "How can I let go, Julia?" he choked out, his voice thick with tears. "You're all I have left." She touched his cheek, her small hand warm against his skin. "You have to try, Daddy," she whispered, her voice carrying wisdom beyond her years. "For me." As her words sank in, Gerald felt a bittersweet acceptance wash over him, blending with a sorrow deeper than anything he had ever known. He held her close, feeling the weight of the years, the loss, the pain, all pouring out in his tears. And as he held her, he sensed the room growing colder, the shadows around them deepening. A quiet presence seemed to rest in the corner, as if watching, waiting. Julia glanced over his shoulder, her face softening into a look of peaceful joy. "She's here," she whispered, her voice tinged with wonder. "Anna's here." Gerald spun around, his heart racing as he scanned the empty room. But there was nothing, only shadows, and a dark emptiness stretching endlessly before him. As he held Julia close, he suddenly felt her slip away, her small figure melting into the shadows, leaving him kneeling alone in the cold, empty space. The silence that followed was deep, an unbroken void that swallowed him whole, filling him with a grief beyond comprehension. Yet in that silence, there was something else, something gentle and warm, like the lightest touch of a hand on his shoulder, a whisper of calm. In that instant, Gerald realized his journey wasn't over. The truth he sought was still out there, hidden within those shadows, and he would uncover it, no matter the cost. In the days after Julia vanished, Gerald was left drifting in a haze of confusion and sorrow. His home felt colder, emptier, each room echoing memories that refused to leave him in peace. He moved like a ghost through the house, haunted by Julia's final words. "You have to let go, Daddy. For me." But the thought of letting go, of severing his last ties to both Anna and Julia, filled him with despair. As he sank deeper into his grief, another thought lingered, haunting him like a distant echo. Julia had seen Anna. She had sensed her presence. Desperate for answers, Gerald retraced old paths, driving down familiar roads he hadn't traveled in years. Without Julia, life felt hollow, yet he was propelled by one final, all-consuming need to uncover the truth, to make sense of the unimaginable events that had shattered his world. One afternoon, he found himself at a park where he had often taken Anna as a child. It was deserted. The playground stood still, the swing swaying softly in the breeze. Gerald sat on a bench, staring at the empty swings, waves of memories crashing over him. He closed his eyes, feeling the echo of Anna's laughter, her small hand in his, the warmth of those fleeting moments that now seemed like distant dreams. "Gerald," a voice pulled him back to reality, and he looked up to see a figure standing a few feet away. For a moment, his heart skipped with recognition. He found himself doubting his own mind, thinking it might be Julia, or perhaps even Anna. But as the person came closer, he recognized a face he hadn't seen in ages, a woman from his past. "Grace," he whispered, his voice laced with shock. Grace had been a dear friend of his late wife, almost like family at one point. She'd left Boston many years ago, shortly after Anna's passing, and he hadn't heard from her since. Slowly, Grace approached, her face softened by a blend of sympathy and concern. "I heard about Julia," she murmured, her tone quiet. "I came as soon as I could." Her words sent a shiver through him, and he found himself wondering how she could even know about Julia. Since Julia had appeared, he hadn't shared anything with anyone beyond his close circle. How do you know about Julia?" he asked, barely managing to speak above a whisper. Grace paused, a look crossing her face that he couldn't quite read. "Gerald, I need to tell you something," she said gently, gesturing for him to sit down on the bench. He complied, and she took a seat next to him, her hands twisting together in a nervous gesture. "There's something I never told you about Anna. Or about your wife," she began, her voice heavy with regret. "When your wife was young, she had an experience. She said she'd been visited by a spirit, a young girl who claimed to have some connection to her. She never fully understood it, but felt that this spirit was watching over her, like a guardian of sorts." Gerald listened, his heart pounding as memories of his wife's journal surfaced in his mind, the one where she'd written about seeing a mysterious girl in her dreams. Grace's voice shook as she continued. "When Anna was born, your wife grew fearful. She believed the spirit had returned, but she couldn't tell if it was there to protect or to harm. She was conflicted, Gerald." Grace's words weighed heavy, and Gerald could feel a tightness in his chest. "Are you saying you think Julia is that spirit? That she's somehow connected to this?" Grace nodded slowly, her eyes searching his. "Gerald, I think Julia is part of something larger than us, something we may never understand. I believe she appeared because your grief, your longing, somehow brought her back." Gerald clenched his hands, anger and sorrow stirring within him as he grappled with the implications of Grace's words. He recalled the countless nights he spent wide awake, overwhelmed by confusion and fear. The fear of losing Julia after already enduring the loss of Anna. And now, realizing that Julia's presence was tied to his own unresolved grief and his inability to release the past. It felt like a harsh twist of fate. Grace gently rested her hand on his shoulder, her eyes brimming with empathy. "Gerald, I know you loved Anna, and I know losing her tore you apart. But maybe, just maybe, Julia was sent to help you heal. Perhaps she was a bridge, a way for you to find peace with what's happened." He shook his head, the pain feeling raw and immediate. "How can I find peace? Grace, I've lost everything. I lost Anna and then I lost Julia." Grace took his hand, her voice soft. "Gerald, sometimes we have to release the ones we love, not because we want to, but because holding on keeps both them and us locked in pain. If you truly love Anna and Julia, you have to let them find rest. And maybe you'll find rest too." They sat together in silence, her words sinking in. Memories of Anna's laughter and the warmth of Julia's small hand in his surfaced, and he began to see that Grace was right. His love had kept him clinging to memories and pain, binding Julia to him in a way that had only deepened his sorrow. At last, he looked up at Grace, his voice strained. "How do I let go, Grace? How do I say goodbye to them?" She offered a sad smile, her eyes filled with understanding. "Sometimes saying goodbye doesn't mean forgetting. It's about releasing them with love, knowing that they'll always be a part of you. Maybe it's time you visit Anna's grave, Gerald. Take Julia's bracelet and give them both the peace they deserve." With a new quiet determination, mingled with deep sorrow, Gerald left the park. He drove to the cemetery, clutching the bracelet, feeling its warmth in his hand. His fingers traced the delicate details of the silver charm he'd given Anna years before. He walked slowly, each step stirring memories until he finally stood before Anna's grave, feeling the weight of the years he had carried his grief alone. He closed his eyes, picturing Anna's smiling face, her laughter, and the happiness she had brought him. Then he saw Julia's face, her gentle gaze, the way she had called him Daddy, with such trust, as if he were her true father. "Anna, Julia," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I love you both. I'm so sorry for all the pain, for holding on too tightly. I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I was the one in need of saving." A gentle breeze drifted through, carrying a soft murmur, almost as if the earth itself was whispering back. He set the bracelet down gently on the grave, his fingers lingering as he released it, feeling a surprising calm begin to settle over him. At that moment, something shifted within him, a lightness, a release, as though the weight he'd been carrying for so long was finally lifting. In the quiet of the cemetery, he thought he could hear the faint laughter of two girls drifting through the air, a memory that would always linger. As he turned to leave, a peacefulness washed over him. The shadows that had haunted him for so long seemed to recede, and memories of Anna and Julia now felt like a blessing rather than a curse. They'd always be a part of him, but now he felt they could rest in peace, allowing him to move forward. With each step away from the cemetery, he felt a little lighter, a little more whole, recognizing that love, in its truest form, had the power to heal. Not only the living, but also the spirits that lingered in those unseen places. The days following Gerald's visit to the cemetery felt like stepping from the darkness of a dense forest into the first light of dawn. He had left the bracelet on Anna's grave, a symbol of the love he felt for both his daughters, hoping it would bring them and himself a sense of peace. Yet, even as he tried to let go, there was still an emptiness in his heart, a hollow ache that just wouldn't fade. It seemed like this might be his reality, a life stretched out, haunted by memories. Then, he received a call from an unfamiliar number, and something told him to pick up. "Mr. Griffin," a steady, low voice said, "this is James Keller. We haven't met, but I once knew your wife. I heard you've been having a hard time, and I think I may be able to help." Gerald's heart skipped a beat. The voice had a weight to it, like a man who had seen and known much over the years. He felt a strange blend of dread and curiosity. "How do you know me?" Gerald asked, cautious. There was a pause before James spoke again, his voice softer. "Your wife was a dear friend of mine. She and I shared certain understandings. I know about the spirit she once saw. The girl she believed was connected to her. She told me that if anything ever happened to her, I should look after you. That's why I'm reaching out." Gerald didn't know what to think of this stranger who seemed to know his wife's secrets, things she'd never told him, and yet he couldn't ignore the small spark of hope that flickered in his chest. "Please," he said at last, his voice a mix of hope and apprehension. Needing answers, Gerald felt like he couldn't keep going like this. He agreed to meet James later that evening at a quiet, out-of-the-way diner just outside town. Gerald arrived early, his heart racing with anticipation. When James finally came in, Gerald spotted him right away. James was a tall, slender man in his 70s, his face worn with age and life's experiences, his eyes sharp yet gentle. They exchanged a few brief introductions. Then after a sip of coffee, James spoke in a steady, serious tone. "Gerald, your wife came from a line with a unique gift, a sensitivity to spirits, to energies we don't fully understand. She was afraid of it, but she couldn't ignore it, and I believe that sensitivity was passed down to Anna, and in a way, to you." Gerald struggled to process James's words. "Are you saying that's why Julia appeared?" Because of this connection? James nodded, explaining. Spirits are often drawn to unfinished stories, to unresolved grief. Your love and longing, in my opinion, called Julia's spirit back. But there's more to it. Have you ever wondered if Anna and Julia weren't just separate beings? What if they were connected, two halves of the same soul? Gerald's heart pounded, his thoughts spinning. It was a possibility too profound to fully grasp. But as he reflected on the connection he'd felt with Julia, how she seemed to carry pieces of Anna's memory, it started to make a strange kind of sense. Connected? He whispered, awe and sorrow in his voice. So you're saying Julia was part of Anna? James nodded solemnly. Yes, and I believe Julia's spirit won't find peace until you accept that both she and Anna are at rest. Gerald's hands trembled as he took in James's words. How do I accept that, James? How do I find peace with losing them both? James placed a steady hand on Gerald's shoulder. By letting go of the guilt, by remembering they loved you. Love doesn't end with death. Sometimes, love is so powerful, it reaches beyond the grave to remind us what truly matters. Gerald felt a tear slip down his cheek, his heart heavy with both sorrow and gratitude. What do I need to do? James handed him a small, weathered envelope. This was your wife's. She entrusted it to me for safekeeping, asked me to give it to you if the time ever came. And I believe that time has come. With shaky hands, Gerald took the envelope, feeling the weight of it, as though it held the final answer to the mystery he'd been trying to unravel. He carefully opened it, pulling out a handwritten letter in his wife's familiar script. As he began reading, each word seemed to tighten around his heart. My dearest Gerald, if you're reading this, then I am no longer with you, and I can only imagine the hurt you must be feeling. There's something I need to share, something I was too afraid to tell you while I was alive. I always felt the presence of a young girl watching over me, like a part of my own heart had come to protect me, and later, to protect our daughter. I didn't tell you, because I feared you'd think I was losing my mind. If you ever sense her presence, please don't fear her. She is part of our family, a bridge connecting us to something greater. Love her, Gerald. Cherish her. And forgive me for not telling you sooner. With all my love, forever, Emma. Gerald's tears flowed freely, blurring the words as he read. All the years he'd spent grieving, asking questions, trying to cope with the losses of both Anna and Julia. It suddenly made sense in a way he'd never imagined. Emma had felt it too, this presence that went beyond life and death, holding their family together. James spoke softly, his voice filled with understanding. Gerald, Julia came to you because you needed her, but also because she needed you. And now, it's time for you both to find peace. Gerald nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over him, even as his heart felt heavy. He finally understood that his love, his longing, had called Julia into his life, but it was his acceptance that would allow her spirit, and his own, to find rest. That night Gerald returned home, a weight he'd carried for years feeling lighter. As he walked through his house, it no longer felt haunted by memories, but filled with a warmth that had been there all along, just beneath the surface. He entered the living room and stopped in his tracks. There, sitting on the couch, was a small, familiar figure. Julia's golden curls caught the soft light, her gaze calm and wise, far beyond her years. "Daddy," she whispered softly, "thank you for understanding." Gerald drew closer, his heart racing as he knelt beside her. "Julia, I'm so sorry for everything, for holding on too tightly, for keeping you from peace." She smiled, a gentle, forgiving smile that warmed him in a way he hadn't felt in years. "It's okay, Daddy. I was always with you, and I always will be, even when you can't see me." He reached out, his hand trembling, and she took it, her small fingers warm against his. Will I ever see you again?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. She nodded, her gaze steady. "Whenever you need me. Love doesn't end, Daddy. It just changes." As she spoke, she began to fade, her form growing fainter, like morning mist. Gerald held her hand until he felt only air, her presence slipping away, leaving him with a deep, aching peace. The room was quiet, and the shadows no longer felt ominous, but comforting, filled with memories and love that had defined his life. He stayed there for a long time, letting the silence envelop him, feeling as if he'd been granted a gift, a final moment to say goodbye. As the dawn's light streamed through the windows, casting a soft glow over the room, Gerald closed his eyes, a gentle smile on his lips. He knew in his heart that both Anna and Julia were finally at rest, and he, at last, had found the peace he had been searching for. In the days that followed, Gerald began living with a new sense of purpose. He visited the park, watching children play and hearing faint echoes of Anna and Julia's laughter in the breeze. He reconnected with old friends, sharing memories of his daughters and finding comfort in spaces once filled with grief. Despite the fact that he never saw Julia again, she was always with him, a warmth, a whisper, a reminder that love knows no boundaries of space or time. He knew, deep down, that his daughters were with him, their spirits woven into his, guiding him toward a future he could now face with strength and serenity. For the first time in years, Gerald felt truly alive. As he moved through his days, he carried the certainty that he was never alone. He had found the truth, and in doing so, he had found himself whole and healed, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. Gerald's newfound peace was delicate, like the first griffin shoots of spring after a long winter. Each day, he felt lighter, his heart unburdened, though the memories still lingered, like shadows just beyond his view. He had come to see Julia's presence as both a blessing and a mystery. Yet he sensed that there was one final truth still waiting, a deeper piece of the story he had yet to uncover. One morning, as he sat at his kitchen table, sipping coffee and looking out the window, a knock at the door made him jump. His heart quickened. Visitors were a rare occurrence these days, and he certainly wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened the door, he found a young woman standing there, her face pale and serious, her gaze sharp and steady. "Mr. Griffin?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. "My name is Marianne. I'm here about Julia." Hearing Julia's name from the mouth of a stranger hit him like a shockwave, and Gerald felt his knees go a little weak. He gestured for her to come in, inviting her to take a seat. Though his mind raced with questions he was almost too afraid to ask. Who was she? How did she know about Julia? Marianne glanced around the room, her eyes lingering on the remnants of his past, old photos, keepsakes from a life haunted by loss. Finally, she turned to him, her expression shadowed by an emotion he couldn't quite read. "I don't really know how to say this," she began, twisting her hands in her lap. "But I've been searching for answers too. Before my grandmother passed, she told me stories. Stories about a girl with golden curls who seemed to be caught between worlds. She always mentioned a bracelet, a piece of jewelry she believed belonged to a girl named Anna. My grandmother thought the spirit of this girl was reaching out, asking for help." Gerald's heart thudded painfully as he listened, each word pulling him back to memories of Julia and the bracelet he'd left on Anna's grave. He tried to keep his voice steady, but the weight of buried emotions made it tremble. What does this mean? He managed, barely above a whisper. Why are you telling me this? Marianne leaned in, her gaze unwavering. I found a letter my grandmother left behind, and it mentioned you, Mr. Griffin. She said that if I ever felt a calling, if I ever saw visions, I was to find you. She believed our families are connected, that there's a link between this world and the next. Gerald's head swam as her words sank. He had always sensed there was something beyond explanation about Julia, something anchored in the past. But he had never imagined another family might be involved. This young woman, with her determined eyes and quiet strength, seemed like the missing key to a long-standing mystery. You're saying your grandmother saw Julia? He asked, struggling to keep his voice calm. Marianne nodded. Not just Julia. She believed she glimpsed both her and Anna. I know it sounds strange, but she thought they were somehow intertwined, two halves of one spirit, bound by something neither could control, something that's been there for generations. Gerald felt a chill as Marianne's words took hold, the weight of her revelation pressing down on him. He had always sensed that Julia was more than a memory, more than just a ghost lingering from his past. The idea that she might be tied to him by a connection stretching across lifetimes stirred both wonder and fear within him. Marianne paused before speaking again, her voice soft. Mr. Griffin, my grandmother believed there was a way to set them free. She called it the last rite, a ritual of release. She said as long as your grief clung to them, they would never truly rest. Gerald felt his chest tighten. He thought he had moved on from his grief, that he had come to terms with the memories of his daughters. But as he listened to her words, he realized a part of him, some shadowed corner of his heart, still held on to the pain. He hadn't fully let go, because letting go would mean facing the emptiness and loneliness that would follow. Marianne reached into her bag and pulled out a small, well-worn book. This belonged to my grandmother, she said. It contains instructions for the last rite, a way to fully release grief and give their spirits the peace they deserve. Gerald took the book from her, feeling its age in his hands. The leather was soft, worn from years of use, and the pages held notes written in a delicate, looping script. The ritual it described was ancient, meant to truly release grief. As he read, a wave of fear washed over him. The ritual required him to return to the place of their final goodbye, the cemetery where he had left Anna's bracelet. There, in the silence of the graveyard, he would have to speak the words of release, recognizing not only his love, but his readiness to live without them. Marianne placed a comforting hand on his arm. I know this is difficult, Mr. Griffin, but I believe this is the only way for them, and you, to find peace. Gerald looked up, his vision blurred by tears. It feels like I'm losing them all over again, he whispered, his voice heavy with sorrow. She gave him a sad smile, her gaze warm with empathy. Sometimes, to truly love, we have to let go, completely. That evening, Gerald found himself at the edge of the cemetery, clutching the book tightly. The air was thick with fog, and shadows seemed to dance around him as if the spirits of the past had come to witness this final act. He walked slowly among the graves, each step echoing in the stillness, until he reached Anna's resting place. Her bracelet lay on the stone, just as he had left it, faintly glimmering under the pale moonlight. He knelt down, his heart racing. As Gerald's mind filled with memories of Anna and Julia, he felt their presence all around him, like a gentle whisper in the breeze. With shaken hands, he opened the book and began reading the words of the ritual. Each line urged him to express his love, his grief, and finally, his readiness to let them go. He took a deep breath, his voice a soft murmur in the darkness. Anna, Julia, I've loved you both more than words can capture. I held on so tightly, clinging with all my heart, and by doing so, I kept you from peace. I'm sorry for not letting go. As he spoke, a warm sensation spread through him, a lightness he hadn't felt in years. He continued, his voice growing more certain, the words spilling out like a long-awaited confession. I release you both, not because I love you less, but because I love you more. I want you to be free, to find peace. Around him, the air seemed to shimmer. The fog began to lift, revealing a clear, starry sky above. And in that moment of clarity, he saw them. Two figures standing side by side, their faces gentle and calm, bathed in a soft glow. Anna, his beloved daughter, and Julia, the mysterious, haunting presence who had brought both love and questions into his life. They looked at him with understanding, their expressions full of gratitude, their eyes conveying a peace that softened the ache in his heart. Gerald felt tears slip down his cheeks as he gazed at them, his heart swelling with both joy and sorrow. "Thank you, Daddy," Anna's voice whispered, as soft as the night air. "Thank you for letting us go." Gerald nodded, feeling his heart both break and heal in that instant. He knew this was their final farewell, the closure they all needed. As he watched them slowly fade, their forms dissolving into the starlight, he felt a deep calm settle over him, a peace he thought he'd never find. When they disappeared completely, he closed his eyes and took a deep, steady breath. The night was silent, the cemetery empty, yet he no longer felt alone. His heart held the warmth of their love, a love that would remain with him always, guiding him forward. With a quiet smile, he turned and walked away from the cemetery, his steps light and assured. For the first time in years, he felt truly free, ready to embrace the life waiting for him. As he walked on, he knew he'd carry their spirits with him, not as shadows, but as cherished memories, forever bright and beautiful, deep within his heart. That night, Gerald returned home from the cemetery feeling a mix of lightness and longing, as though a weight had lifted but left a soft ache behind. It was an unusual feeling, this calm with a hint of emptiness, but he sensed that the void was only temporary, a natural part of healing. Yet as he stepped into his quiet home, he felt something unresolved, a subtle nudge from within, whispering that there was a truth left undiscovered. It was barely there, a soft echo of Julia's voice urging him, "Find the truth." He knew he wouldn't find peace until he followed this lead to its end. The next morning, as he gazed out the window at the pale winter sky, he remembered the box of letters and keepsakes from Emma stored in the attic. It had been untouched for years, and that was where he had found her old journal, with its haunting entries about visions of a mysterious girl she had seen long before Anna was born. He wondered if more clues might be hidden within. With a renewed sense of purpose, Gerald climbed the narrow attic stairs, the air thick with dust and memories. The chest sat in a corner draped in an old blanket, as if waiting for him. He knelt, hands trembling, and opened the lid. Beneath the letters and photos, he found a small, delicate box he hadn't noticed before. It was different, covered in worn velvet, soft to the touch, and inside was a single folded letter and a pendant, a finely crafted locket. His heart raced as he unfolded the letter and saw Emma's handwriting. "My dearest Gerald, if you're reading this, you've reached a place in life I once feared might come. There are things I kept from you, not out of mistrust, but from love, to shield our family from shadows I never fully understood. The visions, the girl, they were real, Gerald, as real as anything. She was part of a legacy I inherited without choice. Her name was Julia, and she's been a presence in my family for generations, appearing every few decades to one of us, seeking a home, a place of belonging. It's believed she carries parts of us, our joy, sorrow, and love, serving as our family's spirit guardian. When Anna was born, I feared Julia would return, bringing with her the weight of past lives and lost love. But I also hoped she came to guide us, to help us find peace. And when we lost Anna, I knew Julia had reached out to you, offering a gift passed down long before our time. I kept it with the hope it would one day find its way back to her or to you, a reminder that our love never dies. It only changes form. If you're reading this, Gerald, remember that love endures. Let it guide you as you go forward. I will always be with you in every breath, every memory, every whisper of our story. Yours forever, Emma. Gerald's hands trembled as he finished reading the letter, his vision clouded with tears. He gently touched the locket, feeling the chill of the metal slowly warm beneath his fingertips. It was a simple yet beautiful piece, with a small engraved flower. Anna, he realized. As he held it, he felt like he was holding a part of Julia, along with pieces of Emma and Anna, all bound together by this delicate token of love. In that moment, he understood that Julia wasn't just a distant figure from Emma's past. She had been part of their family for generations, quietly watching over them. The feeling of finally uncovering this connection filled him with an overwhelming sense of belonging, as if he had pieced together the final part of a lifelong puzzle. Julia hadn't been a stranger, nor a mere memory. She was family, a spirit of love and protection passed down across time. She was tied to them, not only by his sorrow, but by a love that transcended generations. Sitting there with the locket in his hand, Gerald felt a warmth radiate through his chest, a feeling of completeness he had never known before. It was as though Emma, Anna, and Julia were all right there beside him, wrapping him in a love that was eternal. That night, as he lay in bed, he sensed his family's presence all around him, filling the room with a comforting warmth. In the quiet moments before sleep, he could almost hear a faint, familiar sound. Anna's laughter, soft and pure, like a distant melody. Then, Emma's voice echoed gently in his mind, filled with love. "You found her, Gerald. You found the truth, and now we can all be at peace." A soft smile touched his lips as he closed his eyes, feeling a lifetime's weight lift from his heart. He knew he would never truly be alone. They would always be with him, woven into his memories, his very soul. And as he drifted off, he sensed a light touch on his shoulder, like Julia herself bidding him good night, a final farewell whispered in the quiet. The next morning, Gerald woke with a calm he hadn't felt in years, a quiet joy, and a sense of completion had taken the place of the emptiness that had once filled him. Slowly, he rose and walked to the window, where the sunlight poured in, filling the room with a warm golden light. Looking out over the city, everything seemed clearer, brighter, and more alive. He understood now that love was the force connecting him to Emma, to Anna, and to Julia, a force that would guide him forward toward a life he could finally embrace. He spent the morning flipping through old photographs, revisiting memories of his family with a heart filled not with sadness, but with gratitude. It felt like a gift, a chance to carry them with him in a way that healed instead of hurt. Later that afternoon, he went to the park where he had once walked with Anna as a child. Sitting on their favorite bench, he felt their presence beside him, a gentle reminder that they would always be with him. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Gerald paused, feeling a fresh sense of direction. He walked home with lighter steps, his heart wide open to whatever awaited him. He understood there would still be times of sadness, days when he'd miss them, but he also knew he'd never truly be alone. For the first time in years, he felt a deep peace, ready to step forward with a heart filled with love and memories that would stay with him. As he shut the door to his house that evening, he felt a quiet presence encircling him, like the gentle comfort of family coming together, a connection that even death couldn't sever. The days that followed brought an unexpected calm, one he hadn't imagined he'd feel again. The pain of loss that once overwhelmed him now felt more like a gentle scar, a reminder of the love he'd shared with his family, rather than a wound that refused to heal. Each morning, he woke with purpose, carrying Emma, Anna, and Julia, not as lingering shadows, but as treasured pieces of his heart. One morning, as he sipped coffee by the window, a knock at the door broke his quiet solitude. Opening the door, he found his neighbor, a kind woman named Helen, standing on his porch with a warm smile and a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Good morning, Gerald," she greeted him. "I thought you might enjoy a bit of company today. I brought you some fresh muffins." Her voice was gentle, her expression warm, and Gerald realized he hadn't welcomed many visitors in quite some time. He replied, "Thank you, Helen," feeling grateful for her consideration. They sat together in his cozy kitchen, the air filled with the aroma of freshly baked muffins. As they shared coffee and conversation, Gerald felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. It was a quiet joy, a sense of connection that brought him back to simpler, happier days. Helen listened as he reminisced about Anna's laughter ringing through the house as she raced down the hallway, and about how Emma's kindness and grace had been the guiding light of their family. Helen looked at him with a warmth in her eyes. "It sounds like they brought so much joy into your life," she said gently. "And I'm sure they would want you to find happiness again, Gerald. There's so much love in this world. Sometimes it just takes time to let it back in." Her words struck a chord deep within him, and he realized that while he'd made peace with the past, he hadn't yet opened himself to what lay ahead. Emma, Anna, and Julia would forever be with him, but he knew they would want him to live fully, to find new connections and new sources of joy. A few weeks later, Gerald decided to honor their memory in a way that felt healing and joyful. He returned to the park where he and Anna had spent countless afternoons, bringing along a young tree sapling. Choosing a quiet spot beneath the wide open sky, he knelt down, planting the sapling and patting the soil around its roots with care. He pictured it growing strong and tall, its branches reaching up, a living tribute to his love for his family and the memories that had molded him. As he knelt there, the sun warmed his face and a gentle breeze brushed by, rustling the leaves as if whispering a message. In that moment, he felt their presence more vividly than ever, filling him with a deep, indescribable peace. He remained there for a long while, gazing at the sapling standing firmly in the earth, a symbol of all he had come to understand. When he finally stood up to leave, his eyes caught a glimmer at the base of the tree. There lay a small pendant, sparkling in the sunlight, a locket, identical to the one he'd left behind in Emma's belongings. He picked it up, turning it over in his hand, feeling an undeniable sense that this was their final gift to him, a quiet reminder that they would always be close by. Gerald touched the locket hanging around his neck, feeling its familiar weight pressing gently against his chest. This small, quiet keepsake held their love, a silent reminder that he carried close to his heart. In the weeks that followed, Gerald opened himself to new connections. He started volunteering at the local community center, sharing his stories and insights with the younger crowd, who were drawn to his kindness and wisdom. He rekindled friendships with old acquaintances and found himself spending more time with Helen, a companionship that gradually blossomed into something deeper, something beautiful, reminding him of the warmth of true companionship. Through these new connections, Gerald felt his heart expand, realizing that the love he once feared would fade was now growing, interweaving with his love for Emma, Anna, and Julia. He understood now that love wasn't confined by time. It grew, stretching out like the branches of the young tree he'd planted, sinking roots deeper with each relationship he nurtured. One bright spring morning, Gerald returned to the park where his sapling had begun to bloom, delicate griffin leaves opening to the gentle breeze. He sat beneath its budding branches, feeling a sense of accomplishment and gratitude, knowing he'd found a way to honor his family's memory while stepping into the future. Sitting in the sun-dappled shade, he felt a familiar warmth, a peaceful presence filling him, as if Emma, Anna, and Julia were right there with him. In the laughter of the nearby children, in each gust of wind, and in the quiet moments of gratitude in his heart. With eyes closed, he whispered a promise to them. "I'll live fully with all the love you gave me, and I'll carry you with me, always." In that moment, he felt complete, as if every step of his journey had brought him to this place, a life rich with love, both past and present. He was ready now, ready to live each day with an open heart, knowing he was never truly alone. Rising from the tree's shade, Gerald walked forward into the sunlight, wrapped in the memory of all he had loved. A quiet, constant presence leading him into whatever lay ahead. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out the next video, and don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss out on a new story. Thanks again, and see you next time.